I hope everyone enjoyed the lunch. I haven't been to Mandarin in a long time, so I did enjoy the food. It reminded me of a long time ago when I was in high school, and I thought Mandarin was the epitome of cuisine, and it is. It honestly is. So, all right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Vijai. I am the Manager of Policy and Government Relations at the Brampton Board of Trade. I am very grateful to be the moderator for this panel, a panel that I think is only increasingly relevant and important to not just our community, but honestly the future of this country. And it's a bit of a sort of, it's particularly relevant to me because based on past surveys, BCI surveys in particular, so thank you for filling out this year's BCI, and if you haven't, you still have time. But based on some of our discussions and our engagement with our membership, access to skills and to access to labor, in particular skilled labor, is a perennial issue, and it is a major issue in our business community. And understanding how to address this gap is critical in addressing the productivity lag that J. Paul spoke about this morning. So this panel will focus on closing the labor force gap by connecting talent pools and employers in need. We have a great panel of experts who I'll be learning from in my questions. They will be discussing innovative approaches like micro-credentialing, temporary foreign workers, which of course is in the news based on federal decisions. That source of labor has been put into question a little bit, as well as targeted training programs to bridge skills shortages and equip workers for in-demand roles. So I will just take a few minutes then, and instead of introducing everybody myself, I'll allow our panelists to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Joel.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joel Munilal. I'm the operations manager at a company in Brampton, aerospace manufacturing company known as Designed Precision Castings. And I focus on reducing waste in the plant, as well as supporting the workforce there within the organization. And I've been in Canada for 2 years now, and I'm very happy to be with you guys today. So thank you for having me as well.
Okay. Yes, this is working. Okay, my name is Sumana Mathew, and I'm the manager at COSTI Employment Services Brampton location. I've had the opportunity to work with a diverse group of people for over 17 years, and my focus has always been in developing partnerships and creating meaningful opportunities to bridge the gap between employer and community needs. And today, I'm very fortunate to share the table with the other panel members here, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Munilal. I'm Associate Vice President Chemical Technique Education at Algoma University. I've been with Algoma for about 18 years. I'm happy to say that in March of this year, I moved to Brampton, so I'm a very proud Bramptonite. For those of you who don't know, Algoma University is in downtown Brampton. We offer mostly job-related people, or like campus, plans that come out and plans, psychology, economic and social development, as well as we just started recently offering social. And I'm very, very grateful to Brampton Board of Trade for organizing this event. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, everybody. So I'll just get right into it, and perhaps maybe I'll start with Joel, because I think, Joel, you come from a particularly interesting perspective with design precision castings. In your experience, what are the specific skills or expertise that you find most challenging to recruit for? I mean, this is, again, from the Brampton Board of Trade perspective, we hear that there is a access to labor problem, and in particular skilled labor. But if you can get a little bit more granular, what are the specific skills that we should be recruiting for?
Yep, so, sorry, that's fine. Okay, so I guess when it comes to the labor shortage and recruiting for these skill sets, especially in advanced manufacturing, and given the basis of what we do as an organization, some of the very high skilled, high end advanced manufacturing skills, we are finding difficulties in terms of recruiting for. For example, aerospace welding or 442A electricians. Those, to name a few, are people and individuals that we as a plant try to recruit for, but unfortunately, it's posing a challenge. And I guess if we look deeper to that, it's not only the local talent pool, but if you look past that, it's maybe individuals and some underrepresented individuals have these challenges that they may not have been exposed to such skill sets or to grow their career path. What we do as an organization, though, is take these individuals and try and support them to the best of our ability, and to grow them internally. We have a very strong unit, thanks to the leadership of the organization, to try and support these individuals. But for sure, it's mainly these high skilled, those niche kind of profiles that we try to fit in our plant is where we find a challenge mainly. And I, as a community, and I guess as a board of trade, it's something to look into in terms of upskilling individuals coming out straight out of universities or coming into the market. Some support structure there to help us as employers support the growth and furtherance of manufacturing in Brampton and I guess Canada at large.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm curious. I will ask István the perspective from post-secondary on that. But you mentioned something very interesting. You're talking about underrepresented groups in particular, and I want to actually loop in Sumana on this question. So we heard in some ways we've heard from the employer's perspective, from the talent pool perspective, and in particular the marginalized talent pool perspective. I'm talking about youth and newcomers in particular. What are some key strategies to making sure that we are ensuring that they can access these opportunities and they are equipped with the appropriate skill set?
Thank you for the question, Vijay. I think we hear this challenge all the time in our workplace. We have the marginalized population like the newcomers and the youth who are constantly struggling to get their foot in the door. And the challenge is that employers are looking out for those candidates, but there's a huge pool of talent that come to us and look for job opportunities in their fields of expertise. What newcomers and youth, I would say, specifically lack is the lack in their networking abilities. Newcomers being new in the country, they don't always have they're kind of hesitant to reach out to employers. And youth, as they're fresh out of college or university, they don't have established contacts, professional contacts. So as community service providers, what we do is we try to bridge that gap. We try to create those opportunities by having those networking sessions, like structured ones, wherein an employer and a client can come together under one roof and they can discuss different opportunities, how to look for a job, what are the different government resources that they can avail of. Those are different kinds of things that they learn from the industry experts, and this helps them greatly in developing their career. Secondly, we also have programs like the mentoring program, and it's an excellent program. We've seen huge successes with that program where, again, employers and clients get to talk to each other. They learn from the industry experts. They share their insight, and clients are then powerful, go into the market and look for opportunities with a better knowledge about the job market. So that's second. And of course, there are other things that we do in terms of advocacy. We reach out to employers, and as Joel mentioned, that they're having hard time filling those positions. What we do in our advocacy is we reach out to employers and we let them know of the different, the funding that is available, like the Wage Subsidy Program, Canada Ontario Job Grant Program. These are fantastic programs that we offer to employers to take advantage of and to get their workforce trained or to hire new people into the company. So those are excellent programs as well. Last but not the least, we also collaborate with our stakeholders and employers to let them know about the programs that are available. Brampton Board of Trade and other boards of trade, Region of Peel, Peel Halton Workforce Development Group. These are other organizations that we collaborate with to let them know about the programs that we have available. So I would say these are some of the key strategies.
Great. And do you find that there's a lack of awareness for some of these programs with employers?
Absolutely. We do a lot of advocacy, and we still see a lot of employers who are not aware. They confuse us with recruiters. They think that we are headhunters, and often employers will come to us and say, "Oh, do you charge us anything for it?" And we have to explain to them that this is a government funding. You don't pay us anything. Instead, we pay you to hire candidates from us or anybody that's unemployed.
Excellent. And István, I mentioned that I wanted to come to you to get your reaction to now what both Joel and Sumana have pointed out. But what is the role of post-secondary in this pipeline? And in particular, how does Algoma respond to, in Joel's case, the fast-evolving needs of employers? In Sumana's case, sort of the some of the lack of skill sets or skills among marginalized talent groups. How do you respond to these in demand sectors?
Well, thank you for the question. They're really, really good. And
sorry, István, can we press the button there?
Yes, yeah, thank you. It looks like it went out eventually. Excellent question. Thank you for bringing it up. And when you look at the universities in general, you ask faculty members, there seems to be sort of two streams of thought. One stream is that it's sort of something comes out of the 20th century, that we are for liberal education and we teach students to think critically and write critically and all those things, which of course are still very important. But I recognize the importance, but I'm the advocate of the second camp, namely that post-secondary institutions, within the context of the communities that they are part of, and in the 21st century, we must be agile, we must be responsive to the needs of the community. The community often looks at us as the thought leaders, looks at us for training opportunities, and we owe it to the community, to the employers, to come up with solutions that ultimately provide contemporary training solutions to the problems that we see. So in this context, to mention a few, one could, universities or colleges often are a lot more responsive than universities are. They can come up with industry-aligned curricula. So get in touch with one or several employers that have a specific need and design a program, either a certificate or degree, or a micro-credential even, that responds to the immediate 21st century needs of that specific sector. What you can do within, and I think everybody recognizes, we have some students here from Algoma, and all of us have been students at one stage of our life or another, and we know how important it is to have, during our studies, work-integrated learning opportunities. So we put a lot of emphasis, just like every other educational institution, on providing co-op opportunities, internship opportunities. There's nothing that replaces those in the 21st century economy for students to come out of a given degree or certificate or micro-credential with already having these networks established. One also needs to focus on lifelong learning and reskilling. It's one thing that we look at these admittedly traditional degrees that have existed for a very long time, 3-year, 4-year, but often what people want, they have a degree, they need to reskill, they need to maybe change careers at any given stage of their life. And we must, and we have responded in terms of creating this shorter term, very applied, very skill-based, and responsive to the industry needs, micro-credentials and continuing education certificates. And if you look at studies that have been done by higher education strategy associates and other think tanks, you see that this sector is going to become increasingly more and more stronger, but also more competitive. Universities also have to show very strong adaptation to emerging trends. You can't just sit in the ivory tower and keep teaching the things that your faculty might have taught 20, 30, 40 years ago.
we live in a new environment. I keep telling my colleagues that 21st century started 24 years ago. Hint, hint. So we must look at what is emerging. We must look at AI, machine learning, cybersecurity, and build these elements and skills into our programming, and indeed even create brand new programming that hasn't existed, say, 2 or 3 or even 10 years before, to meet the needs again of the employers. And finally, diversity, and this is one of the main elements of today's meeting, is we all need to be very responsive to diversity and inclusion initiatives. So as educational institutions, we have to put a lot of emphasis, and we have. If you look at our Brampton campus, I think about 99% of our students are either local students or international students. Students have just recently come to Canada. We must create the opportunities for them to train, to get the Canada-specific soft skills that employers require, but also the hard skills, the disciplinary skills, so they can actually satisfy the employer's need within Brampton and beyond. Maybe I'll stop there to allow maybe my colleagues to contribute to.
Yeah, no, the thing that I picked up from what you were saying is that the 21st century started 24 years ago, and there is a need to embrace technology and AI, and in particular with our training. And I wanted to ask Sumana, do you see technology and AI as part of the solution, and what is the level of competency with the folks you're working with?
Absolutely. I think we cannot run away from AI, and we cannot run away from technology. It's progressing very quickly, and we need to be abreast with the technology. So to answer your first question, that whether it's part of the solution, yes, it is part of the solution, because what used to take several hours a couple of years back, with automation and technological advancement, it's taking much lesser time. So it does to a certain extent. But does anyone here remember those days when we used to have those Kodak cameras, where you used to put the camera roll inside, and how it used to take 30 or 35 pictures in one roll, go to the photo studio and then develop it. So that was time taken, right, of our day. And now today's teenagers will take hundreds of photos in a day or in a couple of hours. So as technology changes, jobs evolve. And we see that change in our workplaces very, very much. So just to give an example of the Be Ready platform, I'm sure some of you may be aware of that. And the Future Fit AI, they are very good talent solutions that bring a lot of technological advancement to job matching. So I think without technology, we cannot survive. And as István was mentioning about the reskilling and upskilling, I think that's very essential to keep doing the reskilling with the workforce or the upskilling to make sure they are prepared for the jobs that are available.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I want to turn it over to Joel to get, number one, your reaction to that. And then I wanted to ask you specifically in the manufacturing sector, we tend to hear that there's a lot of turnover. And in particular, so we talked about hiring and upskilling, reskilling, but there's also this retention component as well. So what are some strategies in your experience that help folks grow and develop within the organization and help you keep employees for longer?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And I guess when it comes to the workforce and upskilling and retaining this skill sets, it's a lot about the culture in the workforce. We've been very fortunate as well with the leadership of the organization, driving the culture of continuous improvement, driving the culture of change, but making employees know that change is good, and that, artificial intelligence, for example, like robotics and automation, doesn't eliminate jobs, but it helps support and helps make your job much easier. And that's a struggle concept that people battle with, but it's about the employer doing their bit to make people feel more secure, make people feel welcomed, and make people feel that, this is actually a good thing, rather than it's taking my job away. So we implement a lot of just to keep up with the pace of manufacturing, advanced manufacturing and the aerospace industries, it's challenging. It's pretty demanding, but so it's very vital for the growth of an organization to introduce and implement this, such as automation. And so keeping people up to date and keeping people to know that, listen, and how to keep and retain it, is that, we offer programs within the plant or training and development. So it's not only to do with high wage. Many people speak about competitive wages. Competitive wages is a variable, I agree, right? But it's about the culture. It's about the will to develop, and it's about a two-way street where two parties are supporting each other to further grow and support the business and also support themselves. So, we have apprenticeship programs, for example, running in our facility. We have an electrician apprenticeship as well as a millwright apprenticeship running. And those are just some of the key elements or key variables that helps show the rest of the team that, yes, there is growth, and yes, you can be retained within the workforce. But it's also, I guess, employers should also be doing their bit in terms of supporting this challenge in the workplace. And I know we are fortunate with our leadership. It's that drive in seeing past the common ground, seeing past and seeing the long term in a production environment, or any environment for that matter.
Yeah. I'd like to sort of turn our attention to immigration. And in particular, we heard this morning about over the next 3 years, we'll see about a 20% decline in immigration levels. First off, I do want to ask each one of you your feelings about that and whether or not that is a concerning prospect. But specifically, Joel, I'll start with you. You yourself have seen success with the Temporary Foreign Worker Program in particular, and LMIAs. Could you take some time to just explain what those programs are, and then share your particular view of these programs?
Sure. Thank you for that, Vijay. So, when it comes to the LMIA program and foreign worker skill sets, I think that's very, it's a personal one for me. So as I mentioned, I'm in Canada for 2 years, and I come from South Africa. So, about 3 years ago, I was sitting at my desk and I was like, how do I better my life? How do I improve myself? How do I grow? How do I find that stability and that comfort, for not only myself, but my family? And, I decided to make the move and to immigrate. And then came the challenge of trying to find a job overseas and then try to find somebody who would support me. And, it's a very daunting task. It can be very scary, and I was scared. I was grateful enough to have come across my employer who saw the talent, or once again, there was a need for that talent to be filled in the organization, or that support. And we struck a conversation, and then we took it from there, and the rest is history. But I was fortunate to him, and here I am 2 years later in the country, right? So the LMIA is very personal to me, and it can swing both ways. It can be a very positive experience for people. Also, it could be a very negative experience, but it's dependent on how it's handled and how you go about processing it. So we came into the country, and I had to make it work for myself. So the LMIA, yes, it did take a bit of time to get me in, and I think it took us about a year with all the paperwork and all the challenges that came up with it, to a point where we were actually asking ourselves, my employer was asking, is this going to be, is it going to be worth it? And I was asking myself, is this actually going to work out? Am I making the right decision? Yeah. So I guess, at that point, that could be make or break for us as well, because for many employers and employees out there, Canada could lose a lot of skills by just the concept of this time and this delay, right? And many people might be turned away or put off from wanting to pursue this further because of all the challenges and the hurdles that come with it. And then, being blessed to see it from that perspective, and now the flip side of the spectrum. So 2 years later, and we are now, in Canada, working in the organization, given the opportunities that I have been given. Once again, kudos to my boss, my employer. He's really cultivated and nurtured that, and a lot of success. People will leave good jobs, and data shows us people could leave good jobs because of their bosses, right? I was fortunate to have a boss who nurtured it and grew it, and so here I am, and seeing it from that spectrum, where we are now hiring individuals and actually doing LMIAs. So we've done about 4 LMIAs to date, and they've been a positive. We've got positive results, right? But the whole concept of doing the process is challenging. Recruiting that foreign skill set, because with the local talent pool, there are some gaps, and we all know that. Recruiting for some of these positions in the workplace is also hard, because people come in, but they want to venture out. But there is a variable that we have locally, and Brampton specifically, but around the GTA and Canada, is the foreign workers who have the skill sets, who want to work, but are facing challenges from the outside, or whatever case it could be. We are also seeing that with the LMIA comes some challenges, because there's 3 parties involved, right? There's the employee, the employer, as well as consultants or the legal counsel that helps support or bridge that gap. And some of the challenges that we are experiencing as employers is that miscommunication between parties, false information being presented to some of the parties, and this causes a whole lot of confusion, and can also cause some legal problems and issues down the line. And unless once again, fortunate to the employer for having that high integrity and making sure that we take a very strong stance against doing anything that's not in line with the books, or not in line with the legal statuses. And so you have that, you see it, and you hear it from these employees, because they are so desperate to get into the country, so desperate to retain their legal status in Canada, that they are willing to do things like paying exorbitant amounts of money, and or taking on a different knock code that's not within their skill set. And there's abuse in all angles. So yes, that needs to be curbed, and that's what we've experienced from the LMIA. But if handled in the correct manner, if handled the right way, it can become a very beautiful story. For example, my story will always be close to my heart, as well as some other friends and colleagues of mine who walked the journey with me. And it's the will versus the skill. If you have the will, if you have the drive to make it successful, two-way street, employer and employee relationships, then it can be a very successful and a very positive component.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for sharing that personal story, frankly, on this topic. And I'll just say we are obviously constrained by the time limit of this conversation. But if there are any businesses in the audience who are navigating the LMIA, the Labor Market Impact Assessment, or a temporary foreign worker program, whatever it is, I would invite them to speak with Joel and get his advice on how to do that effectively, because it's not untrue that there have been ways that these programs have been misused, but as Joel has been saying, used appropriately, it can actually be incredibly enriching to your business as well. I have 1,000,001 questions about this, but I think what I'll do is I will ask, sticking on immigration, I'll ask István specifically about his reactions to the IRCC's reduction in immigration of approximately 20%, this 20% figure that keeps popping up. And specifically, I should say, in addition to the restrictions, or rather the reduction in the number of hours that international students can work, how does this affect not only the post-secondary industry, but specifically, how does this affect the workforce pipeline that that is necessary to meeting some of our labor shortages? From the post-secondary perspective, what is your assessment of all of this?
I think it will be overstating the obvious that it already has and will have widespread repercussions of these decisions that the government makes seemingly every month lately. But if you look at it sort of objectively, it presents challenges for certain and also presents some opportunities for employers. On one hand, I think, those of you who might be relying, let's say you might be in the manufacturing or retail or hospitality industry, you might already be noticing that there's certainly a talent shortage, and you might find it more difficult to find skilled workers or even sort of entry-level workers for certain jobs. These are going to be, of course, more specific to certain sectors, and I mentioned hospitality and retail. There's going to be certainly increased competition for talent. So when you're putting your job ads out, you might notice that you might get less specific applicants and more sort of the buckshot type applicant that applies to everything, even though when you look at their resume, there's absolutely no relevance to what they applied for. And that again will impact people both in terms of retaining or rather finding people, as well as in terms of the time that is being spent without that employees that would need to do the job. You will, when you have these kind of environments, you will see retention challenges. Typically, the more experienced people or people who have been working in the industry, then different employers will start competing for them, will start literally poaching them. As Sumana has mentioned, yes, you're not a headhunter, but headhunters will become increasingly more important in that environment. And you might also have operational constraints, namely that if you were relying on international students, these restrictions, of course, will mean that certain parts of your operation may be completely restricted or potentially eliminated. On the other hand, these changes, as always, represent opportunities too. In fact, there's whole literature and theory about how to transform walls into opportunities, right? So one element that forces, or one opportunity that this presents to employers, is to look at the employees that they have. We all know that retaining your employees, it's more straightforward and in some ways easier than trying to get a new one, which might take longer, and you often deal with an unknown entity. But if you create professional development opportunities for your own employers, they're much more likely to stay with you. They're much more likely to be able to step into the next available opportunity within the company. It will increase the loyalty of those employees towards the company. It also gives you an opportunity to, if you perhaps were relying mostly on human labor, to think about approaches to adopt automation and technology. To give you an example, and as we were talking about the pictures being shot and film were developed and what we do today, I was reminiscing. I did my schooling in the last decade of the 20th century at some Ontario universities. I know it sounds like a history lesson. And we were using these plastic slides that we used in these circular carousels, and went to a conference and kept pushing the button and the thing were moving. And today we're using Google Slides. And so something that, for example, we are doing as an educational institution in order to cut down on the number of people we need in the office of registrar to provide information, we are training a chatbot that we trained with our academic calendar. And instead of having 39 people answering questions day and night, that chatbot can do that literally 24/7, 365. Very simple, but perhaps easy thing that any employer might consider. We also need to spend time, or another opportunity, diversifying talent pipelines. So don't just look at a certain avenue where you attract people. Try to diversify yourself. Also try to diversify your talent pool. And again, this is where we come back to putting a special attention to people who come from equity-deserving groups or other marginalized backgrounds, whereby if you make your services or your job more accessible to them or more attractive to them, you might be able to attract and retain more of them. You might be able to use the opportunity to enhance your employer value proposition. Why should they work with you? Why should they pick that specific job or career for that matter? And then finally, there could be some adaptation strategies that one might need to consider, like, for example, workforce planning. We often do these hiring scenarios in sort of a saltatory manner. We get the people that we want, and for a while, we don't really hire anybody. And then a couple of people leave, and then we hire again. Why not consider sort of a proactive hiring where you have the feelers out in the community pretty much all the time? Not unlike the federal government does. They have those talent pools, right? And occasionally you just go and dip into available resumes and then hire people. Also enhance collaboration with educational institutions. That could pay dividends in terms of creating professional development programs for your employees, but it could also help in actually influencing their educational programming. If you really, really need a certain outcome, maybe come up with a new product, a new idea, then work with a college or university where they could design a micro-credential, a certificate, or even a degree to speak specifically to that area. So be an innovator rather than a follower. And then finally, we could do a lot of work with policy advocacy. We have access to MPPs and others, and we can influence how policies being made. So if you do need, say, more international students to come, then let us speak to those who make the policies and tell them that if you are more flexible in terms of attracting these students or really people who want to settle in Canada, it's going to be easier for all of us, be it services or employers, to actually attract them to our country. Thank you.
Thank you, István. And I do want to open this up to questions from the audience, but before we get to that, perhaps one final question to Sumana, still on the topic of immigration. We often hear both sides of the story that, recent immigrants, newcomers, are taking away jobs from young Canadians in particular. But we also hear this problem of a lack of Canadian experience, especially when it comes to things like, specific qualifications, accreditations, things like that. But also just generally, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the employers really look for Canadian experience. What is your perspective on this, and how do we navigate this problem?
This is a very interesting question. We hear it from our newcomer clients very often, that they go to those interviews and they face the interviews, come back and tell us that this was an identical match of the job that I did in my former country. And I went for the interview and I was turned down, and I don't know the reason. And some of them, they think that it is because of the lack of Canadian experience. That could be the hindrance of not getting the job, because they do have all the qualifications, experience, and the skill sets. And as much as we empathize with the employers, I do think that there has to be a shift in mindset and learning from other employers who have hired newcomers, because we have tons and tons of examples where employers have hired newcomers and they have not just hired them, but they have made progression in their career and they were retained and grown within the organization. So there's tons of examples that we can give you where newcomers were successful in this job. So employers need to open up and try this caliber. There's a lot of talent available there, and also there is a lot of opportunities to have diversity. Diversity is not just important because it brings a fresh perspective in the workplace, but it also helps with the economic growth, right? It's a win-win solution for everyone, and we all do well. There's good economic. So,
may I contribute to this?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So thank you, Sumana, for bringing out that example, and that's another good example whereby if you have a bit of creative thinking, you could actually be ahead of the market. Namely, that if you give access or an opportunity to candidates who, at first sight, you feel that they may not have the soft skills or Canadian experience they're looking for, if, for example, you resolve that matter by partnering with an educational institution like Algoma University or anybody else of your choice, one can design a micro-credential which would, in fact, provide, that would make mandatory for those new employees something of a short order whereby they could be introduced to sort of cultural norms, expectations of Canadian society, things that they would encounter on a daily basis, or even things that you would necessarily specifically require as an employer in your job place. So one could actually design something custom, a custom micro-credential to prepare those employees, and then suddenly you are one step ahead of the market because you are using and training all those people that other employers might discard, thinking that, well, we need something better.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great piece of advice for the employers in the room as well, to understand and not sort of have a bias necessarily towards Canadian experience, but experience is experience at the end of the day. I would like to open this up to any questions in the audience. We have time for maybe 2 or 3. We have one question here and then another in the back.
Hello?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mathew. I was one of the speakers. I'm from the CNIB, and I'd like to open diversity up to accessibility as number one, and see the value that people take from inclusion as a whole. And then the second part of my question is, when you speak of, I'm hearing a lot about the onus on the applicant of upskilling and micro-credentials. Some of the things that the disability communities have, for example, is we don't always have the highest of income. So we can't necessarily get those upskilling opportunities. My question to the panel is, what do you think about the level of experience? Like, for example, 5 years customer service experience for a role, even at an entry-level role. Do you think there needs to be adjustments made to the amount of years of experience for something like that?
It's a very interesting question. Any takers on that?
I could answer it partially. I think we see a lot of people with disabilities in our program, and we often encounter people who have the challenge of reskilling or upskilling, their skills. And with people with disabilities, we have special government funding available, that if they need to do some extra training or courses to make them at par with the job needs, we do provide them that resources to help them with their skilling, upskilling, and we also advocate to employers on their behalf and provide wage subsidies to employers to engage or to give them a chance to work. We also have several other partners, like CanWin is one of our partners who we work with very closely. And if there are any opportunities, and they only hire for disability, people with disabilities. So we partner with them, and whenever an opportunity becomes available, we share it with our clients and help them get those jobs. So I think that can answer part of your question.
We have a question here.
Thank you for that. My name is Divi. I'm a founder of Nexa, similar like Future Fit, where we're using artificial intelligence technology to create a platform that's going to bridge the gap between employers, job seekers, and training organizations. I wanted to ask a question because you touched upon a topic that, you have Canadians in the workforce and immigrants in the workforce, and some feel like maybe jobs are being taken away, and others feel it's not. And I think it's a great conversation where, if you have a certain skill set, you should be deserving of working in that role. But I wanted to ask, in regards of a real problem, do you feel that no matter how many, I guess, for example, immigrants who come in the marketplace, as well as Canadians we have, shouldn't it be up to a place like Canada to empower entrepreneurs to now create more jobs? Because no matter how many tools we build, skill sets and processes we create, if there's not enough people being encouraged to build companies, right, that will then require jobs to build things, how do we close an employment gap? If then essentially what you have is, so many people are looking for work, and how are we going to place all these talented individuals who then now, are stuck? Because you come here to build something, and it's, a lot of them are get disencouraged, and then they join the other side, where we need people on the other side, right, to be encouraged now to create these, innovations or cool things that can then employ more Canadians. I was just curious what your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe I could speak to that just very briefly. There's a report actually from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I think it's called Portrait of Small Business in Canada, and BDC has some statistics on this. But I think it was around, don't quote me on this, but around 40% of new business starts in Canada come from recent immigrants, newcomers. So newcomers are bringing an entrepreneurial mindset, a spirit into this country, and frankly, we do have an entrepreneurship crisis as well, where we're not creating new businesses the way that we used to. So that's a great reminder that the entrepreneurialism aspect of immigration needs to also be emphasized as we're advocating for these policies. Anyone else on the panel would like to speak to that?
I certainly can speak to what Algoma, for example, does to help with this matter. And by the way, it's very true. It's otherwise we keep talking about a relatively stagnant pool of opportunities, right? Unless we keep creating new opportunities for newcomers. But it's also, I fully recognize that it's not an easy and likely for many an anxiety-inducing scenario. So we have to intentionally train people. We need to intentionally popularize the available options to support them. So for example, what we did, a very tiny example, but telling in some ways, we organized a game jam for our students that was actually facilitated by Unity professionals. That's one of the largest game development companies on the planet. They do a bunch of other things too, like digital twinning, but here I'm talking about game development. And that was followed by our very first incubator / accelerator, where we retained the whole student groups or teams, and we are giving them an opportunity to develop their games to a level where they can hopefully attract angel investment, or they can actually commercialize it. So that's one very, very simplistic example, I admit. But I think all of us, ranging from the City Hall, Brampton Board of Trade, educational institutions, as well as places like TMU's, I can't remember, it's not the Venture Zone and others, right? They certainly do that to try to bring in people, to try to educate them in terms of the available opportunities, and if they would like to start up some sort of a business, to support them. But I fully admit that we definitely need to do more. Thank you.
Yeah. We have time for two more questions. We'll have the gentleman in the tan suit, and then we'll end with Usha.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Jayesh Menon from the Economic Development of City of Brampton, and it's a wonderful panel and wonderful feast of information that we have now. Vijay mentioned about 40% of the stats that you mentioned about in terms of entrepreneurs. That's what you said?
Yeah, new business starts are...
New business starts.
Yeah.
There's another statistics which says that 32% of international students aspire to become entrepreneurs. So that's another one. But my question is on since we have a wonderful panel over here, I'm talking about the partnership programs that happens with the industry. Are there any specific educational institutions having leveraged on industry partnership which aligns in terms of what are the upcoming curriculum or the current curriculum that integrates students to be a part of the industry?
István, I think you might be the most qualified to answer that.
I don't know if I caught the whole question. So basically asking is what are the measures that we can do to align or integrate students with the needs of the industry? Is that correct?
So my point is, are there any specific kind of an industry educational institution partnership program? Or are there any kind of success stories where any cities or a town or a region would have really celebrated the success of this collaboration?
Well, I can speak to collaborations. I don't know if we got to the point of celebration yet, but our institution, again, personal example, or rather institutional example, we have partnered with Unity that I just mentioned before. We founded the National Center of Excellence in Immersive Technologies. Some of you might have spoken to Vijai, who's the director of that center at Algoma. And we are actually working on a concept whereby we are partnering with, obviously with Unity as the provider of the know-how and skills, and also in some ways a supporter of the center, to work with external employers, as well as involve our faculty and students within it. This is where I'm coming to the bit that you were asking about, namely to work together, to be sort of a catalyst or a facilitator of the relationship between the center, between external partner, between faculty who bring sort of the industry-specific theoretical knowledge, and the students who are the doers in many respects, right? So if this is successful and we are still at the beginning stages, then we would be having external partners, which would be the employers, coming to us to come up, for example, with an industry-based solution to their problems. I mentioned this digital twinning example that Unity has pioneered or is doing quite extensively. To use, for example, a more applied and perhaps a more serious example than just gaming, whereby, for example, they could work in the concept of the center with our faculty, with our students, and the external partner to come up with a digital twin of a certain process that employer would like to improve upon. I think something that we actually pitched to the Brampton City Hall was to create a digital twin of the transportation network within the city of Brampton. Because at that point, when you see everything that happens in the city at the level of a room, that you can go in and figure out why certain, for example, transportation, traffic patterns, what is it causing them? It may actually give you the ability to predict and resolve them. Or in other scenarios, the digital twinning could work for training. It would be like, for example, you're trying to build a hospital, you're trying to start a mine, and you have to start training the people before the first, brick is laid, so to speak, or the first, scoop of ground is being taken out of the ground. And creating digital twins of those operations enables you to train people in a very, very safe environment where if they commit a mistake, the mine is not going to collapse. They're just going to be told, study more or do it better. So these kind of relationships, it's what we call them win-win-win, in a sense that the external employer gets their problem solved. The university is being seen as an economic engine and a true applied educator of the community. Faculty members, of course, they do a bit of public service as well as occasionally research, or a lot of research depending on the topic. And then students, most importantly, they learn very up-to-date applied contemporary skills. They form networks with a specific employer and others, and usually have no difficulty finding jobs. So maybe this was a good example and we're looking forward to the success of it, and I'm going to be the first to celebrate it. I'll drink a whole bottle of champagne.
And we'll end with Usha as our last question.
Hi there. Sorry to maybe a curveball question, connecting all the questions that have been in the room. What I see in our community here in Peel and in Ontario is, there's a little bit of an imbalance between necessity entrepreneurs and people who really want to be entrepreneurs. What I mean by that is there are some highly qualified people that come into the country. They can't work in the field, and therefore they become entrepreneurs. Yeah, we need them, yes. But sometimes I have issues with how government allocates funding. Do we need to create one more pizza store, one more food business? Those businesses close in 3 years. I run one of them myself. So do we need more entrepreneurs of that sort, or do we better serve by helping them find their equivalent credentials to get them into employment that they deserve to be in? So that's my opinion of why there's an imbalance. I would love to hear the opinion of the panel members.
Do we have a particular view on necessity entrepreneurs? Yeah.
I'll jump in, and you raised a very important point, because I think everybody during their lifetime, one time or another, thought about becoming an entrepreneur, myself included. One thing that I think and you raise a very important point, we must provide the complete information to anybody who's interested in something, so to make an educated decision. Otherwise, what we are prone to do is repeating failures again and again and again and again. People burn out, go away, or more tragic events can happen. So we need to be, as a community, very intentional, very supportive, very transparent, and literally fill every possible social media in terms of where they can access the information that they need to start something up that actually will work, or has a very high likelihood that will work. Nobody can say it for certain. And if you can't find that information and you can't share it with them, all you end up with people who become disappointed in Canada, or ultimately try things and they become financially affected by those decisions.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and I'll just say as well, the flip side of that is there's going to be a wave of retirees, of business owners, and we'll have to start thinking seriously about succession planning. And there are a number of folks who might have experience, who are coming to this country with experience running certain businesses, who could take the mantle of these existing businesses without having to perhaps start their own. So that's another angle. So that's all our time for this panel. I would like to thank István, Imre, Sumana, Mathew, and Joel Munilal. Please give them a round of applause.